So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how I do the desert bases for my Caravane Overlords. It's actually a very simple technique, and it only requires a couple of materials. So for the basing material, we're going to be using Vallejo Earth Texture Desert Sand, and we're going to be using a palette knife to apply this. Because this is a acrylic-based product, it can be diluted with water, and we can also apply it with a brush to get into those difficult to reach areas, or to just add a bit of texture. So I have an old Raphael brush on hand for this purpose. I've also painted a skull, an orc skull, to add to the base, just a little bit of a detail. You can add or paint up whatever other extra details you want to add to the base. It's not a big deal. I want my desert bases to be fairly simple and very barren. So I've kept it fairly sparse in terms of what I'm adding to the base. But you can really go to town, add whatever you want. The sky's the limit. You can have a super busy desert wasteland or something more simple like I've done. For a bit of ground foliage as well, we're going to be using Army Painter's Winter Tuft. And these come in a variety of sizes, so small, medium, large. And we're going to use Superglue and a pair of tweezers to apply these. And then finally, to finish off, we're going to be dusting the entire base with a layer of dark yellow ochre. And then we're going to be sealing this with mineral spirits. So I've loaded a bit of this into a spritzer bottle, and I'll show you how I apply that later on to fix the pigment. So I have my base, I have the skull pre-painted and glued on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our texture paste and our palette knife, and we're just going to slap this on. So you can see I'm being fairly careful when I apply this, particularly around the skull and the flying stem. And that's because the palette knife isn't a super accurate tool. It's really good for laying down large blocks of the material or large pieces of it. But once I get in there, especially in these little corners, I don't want too much of the round texture on the skull or the stem. And so I'll go back in with my old brush and I'll just very gently push it into position. Just be careful if you end up diluting this a little bit. It does end up drying a little more transparent. So you might have to apply a heavier coat. And we're just going to build up a little bit around the skull to make it look like it's been sitting there for a while, and the sand has sort of started to bury it. And just using our brush, we're going to slowly shape some of these into something a little more windswept. And that's our first step. This material cures pretty quickly, typically within an hour, hour and a half. So we're going to set this aside to dry, and then we'll come back once it's fully cured to add our tuft and our weathering powder. Now that the earth texture is dry on the base, it's time to glue on some tufts. So we're just gonna use some tweezers and some super glue. Now for this base, I'm probably gonna do maybe 2 or 3 tufts because it is my champion. I want it to be a little denser. I'm probably gonna use a small, a medium, and a big one. And before I glue them on, I'm going to want to test fit or just place out where I want the tufts. And the tufts have a bit of tack to them. They're a little sticky on the bottom, so you can place them and dry fit them just to test out where they're going to be, how it's going to look before you glue everything down. And I think that looks pretty good, pretty balanced. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each tuft off. Dot a little bit of super glue. I'm just going to clean up some of these strands. Dot just a little bit of super glue. And then place the tuft down. Now I'm going to set this aside to dry for probably about a half hour. I don't want the super glue to be wet at any point before I do the weathering powders, because otherwise it's going to combine and mix and create a very unsightly gunk. So you want to make sure that the super glue has sufficient time to dry before we go to the next step of adding the weathering powders. Now that the super glue for the tufts is dry, it's time to put the finishing touches in our base. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a light dry brush on the tufts with a bright yellow. I'm going to be using Vallejo's ice yellow for this. So we're just getting a bit of paint on the brush and we're just going to lightly dry brush the tips of the tufts. And this helps to unify the colors, brighten it up a bit, tie it into the base, and it also helps to desaturate the green a little bit. And then using a different dry brush, we're going to add our yellow ochre pigment powders. Now while we want to get the pigment powders all over the base, we want to really focus or concentrate the pigments into the crevices, into the bases where, under the base of the skull and the tufts, to sort of simulate a bit of shadow, add a bit of that rich yellow ochre color. It warms up the Vallejo sand just a bit, adds a bit of nuance. And then we're also going to focus on some of these deeper sand, I won't call them dunes, but where the texture has sort of folded and created these little waves. We want to concentrate some of our pigments there as well. Once I'm happy with that, I'm once again going to take some mineral spirits in my spritzer, and I'm just going to gently spritz the base to help seal in the pigments. You'll notice that when we first spray it, it's going to darken the pigments in the base a little bit, but once the mineral spirits evaporates, it'll brighten back up and we'll have our finished base. We're going to give the mineral spirits a couple hours to fully evaporate and dry. And once it's fully dry, we're going to paint the trim of our base black, glue our model on top, and that's our finished base. So if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more awesome weekly content. You can also follow my Instagram at Vallejo for daily updates on my hobby projects. Until next time, happy hobbying.